my husband, Kevin Holly, and I own the bookstore at Jefferson, about 2 blocks down the way. And we just closed the bookstore about 10 minutes ago, so then he'll be coming on down from there. But we want to welcome you to come support authors, local and national authors. The Wine Books is proud to help sponsor this book reading, and I hope that you will buy them out so my wife doesn't have to carry any books back home. Time you bring them, you don't want to be boxing them up, taking them back. So if you already have your book, you might want to buy one for a friend, Father's Day coming up, holiday, so just thinking it. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Ben Willis, who's going to kind of, carry the discussion. Turn out, there's some seats in here. Please come on in. It's a tight spot. I couldn't get the auditorium. I was already booked.
Bring this out, your round of applause real quick. A lot of different events throughout the course of the year, making sure that we put literacy as focus. And this is one of the reasons that we're here to honor an author, put a lot of time and effort into his work. We would like to respect him today. A little bit about Anwar, a scientist, writer, and speaker. He earned his bachelor's degree in general biology at Johnson C. Smith School and went to the University of Michigan to obtain his doctoral degree in pharmacology. Dr. Dunbar developed a love for stories at a young age, particularly those dealing with spirits, such as those written by authors like Stephen King. And he is particularly fascinated by tales of success, changing environments, and overcoming the adversities in life, including those written by Malcolm Gladwell. And one of his favorite authors is Dr. Dunbar. Dunbar is actually like family to me. We actually call each other cousins and have a mutual connection that way. So I've known him all of my life, most of my life. When I say that I've known him since kindergarten, I really mean that. We started at Campus West College Learning Lab. Dr. Harvey was here. She was my counselor and my auntie. I also have an educator. Bill is also in the house today too. But education has always been an important part of our lives. I remember Anwar as a little young man together, but he was always inquisitive in class. I remember looking over at school and good question. Always very kind, always a gentleman, and I'm very happy to be with him today. So without further ado, Dr. Dunbar. Thanks for that generous introduction. Comfortable here. Let's go here. All right. Thank you everyone for coming out. It's my first time doing something like this, so it's new. I want to thank Wine Books for helping helping put this together. Just met recently in December. I want to thank the Challenger and the Criterion and the Jefferson Library and Benjamin for moderating this. This story, let's see, it's a bunch of different things, but it's in large part a message for a younger gentleman like that sitting right there. And it's not what I'm talking about with what there's a lot of education. There's a reading thing happening in this country with young gentlemen like that right there. So as I was writing this, I was thinking some of the messages may not get to who needs them the most. But that's just something I mention introduce this. I want to acknowledge all of the prior in the past Young Cup and Section 6 basketball players. When you're writing something like this, that's I'm a Gen Xer, so I think of things in terms of generations. I was born in '76, so I witnessed the world. I witnessed basketball in a specific window. That's
Roberson, or so many other players who came before my group. Okay, and there was a considerable amount of research that went into this. I interviewed 43 players and coaches. Some of them are here, but it was very, very educational to learn about Buffalo before my time, Buffalo basketball before my time, and that may be a project all in itself, right? A comprehensive history of and Western New York basketball, which I'm open to trying that. So I've already started that, but the story is focused on a specific thing. This area has produced uh, uh, top talent, high-level talent. Some of the guys have gone on to play professional basketball. Some of them have played pro ball in the league, NBA, and overseas. Thinking about Jason Rowe, and then there were a lot of other players like myself who didn't go on beyond high school. Maybe wanted to, but didn't go on. But for me, this story is something I think about pretty regularly because I'm working my government job, and the lessons in the story very much carried me through, or helped carry me through my doctoral studies. Lessons about picking yourself up off the mat every day. Lessons in perseverance, lessons in dealing with disappointment, lessons about changed environments, lessons about people coming and going in your lives, colleagues, friends, relatives, and just figuring out lessons on staying focused on your goals. That's what this experience taught me, and that's what I thought was important to pass on. The game of basketball is the setting, but the reason it says on the cover, this is quoting something, sports are a microcosm of life, that's because the lessons we learn there, they translate into the adult world. Okay. So, with that being said, it's not, I open the book with a comprehensive, and you have to set the story world. So the story world is here. It's Western New York. It's the Yale Cup in Section 6. So I introduced the Yale Cup. I introduced all of the theory, county, interscholastic conferences, and Niagara Frontier to talk about conferences. I set up the world for the reader, and then I kind of walked the reader through seeing the shot. The shot, one of the most magical things I've ever seen, which was Michael Jordan in that shot against that 88 season. Middle school kid, that was one of the most magical things I've seen at that point. And a lot of youngsters, oh my goodness, there's girls coming. I said you would stop the show, but it's Mother Doyle.
Yeah.
That camera is.
Oh, the camera's on. Okay, right here. Is that good?
That's good.
Right here. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm sorry. No. The world keeps on saying you have to stop.
Yeah, right here.
Well, thank you for coming. This story is about a bunch of different things. It's about what that experience taught me. But it's also a story about finding your way in the world. Puberty and adolescence, tumultuous time for, I think, probably for all of us. But it was about finding your way in the world. That's what that experience taught me. It's what I call a Gladwellian story. One of my favorite authors, Gladwell, who writes books about unpacking things. People are successful. They're not successful. But set the stage for people to be successful. Environments when it's supposed to be successful. So it's very much influenced by that. But it's also about educators and mentors and the role that educators play in our lives. Uh, Again, there were many coaches in the Young Cup. There were many coaches in Western New York. Coach Ken Jones is a key figure in the story, and I think whoever reads this review, this is about difference that those individuals make. There were many coaches, Romeo McKinney, Coach Cardinal, Coach Bob Mitchell, Coach Ken Pope. There were so many coaches through the years who sacrificed their time, poured into people after school. Not just basketball players, but football coaches. There's that Coach Sharadi just passed away. So alongside the Yale Cup, I said the Harvard Cup as well. So some parallels there as well. So strikes my ears to like. Yeah, and also Mr. Walter Cook from Campus West. He recently passed away. He's in here. He gave the short, the chubby kid who saw that was running the shot spot on the Campus West boys basketball team. Said you're going to get player manager. You're not going to play much, but you'll at least be able to be on the team. I just wanted a spot on the team, and Mr. Cook was showing some mercy. So I'm always grateful to Mr. Cook. The title, I know that for some people, especially who are not from Western New York, it may have been it may be a little deceptive. The engineers, my brother talked about that. I was really channeling something similar to Remember the Titans, starring Denzel Engineers was our high school basketball team. But I also thought about the preparing discussion points that this was one Western New York basketball sport. So kind of like I grew up in the early 80s in the Star Wars universe. There are many stories in the Star Wars universe. There's a Buffalo traditional story. There's a Richie Campbell Burgard story. There's a performing arts story. This is just one. Okay. There's a and he's not. Yeah. So that's where the title came from. And I think with that, I think where I read through all of that. And then Benjamin review it as well and ask the questions and then we'll wrap up. Yeah. So I was thinking what would be appropriate to share. So this is a meaty story. Me and Benjamin were talking about this, and I think every time someone picks this up, they see, okay, it's a meaty story. It's not something unless you're retired and you're on the beach to finish this. I tend to read books throughout over time. But I chose to read, I'm going to read two passages here from chapter 17, which is sophomore year tryouts and assembling the 1991-92. So this is me trying out for the Hudson Tech boys basketball team my sophomore year. Didn't know what I was doing. Went to basketball camp for the first time that summer. And Jones had a basketball. Got distracted by something that summer and almost was academically unqualified for those tryouts. And I think it's important to note that all throughout high school, I was an unfocused student with the potential, which is the focus to be an honorable student that came later. But I made it to tryouts with the minimum grade, and it wasn't like it was on television. So, and keep in mind, Coach Jones was a Bobby Knight type. There were different kinds of coaches. There are players coaches. There are older grizzled coaches who want things a certain way for certain kinds of kids. Coach Jones, as described, is probably And so before tryouts, we give up these packets that, you know, your academic, eligibility forms, but also things to think about that you want, and also other motivational materials for us as students. Okay. There were more pages in the packet. One sheet read, to be the best, you have to play the best. It had the graphics of the same player dunking the basketball copied several times on the page. Another page had a copy of the varsity letter T. On the upper part of the T, it said Yale Cup horizontally and champs, spelled out vertically. So the previous year, my freshman year, they won the Yale Cup 13. That was a big deal. That's first. They won the section. The Class B section. Below that, on the lower part of the T, was a basketball with 90 up to the right and 91 to the left. On another page, same for digital players, there were statements that read, the will to win is not enough, and below that, are not willing, prepared to win. An article was photocopied on the next page entitled, Joy of Victory is Why Sports Exist, written by Jeff Riggenback from USA Today. It discussed how the desire to win is what makes sports fun and what kids learn from competition. On the next page, Coach Jones typed, one person can make the difference, and every person should try. The final two pages were titled in all capital letters, Team, which consisted of an exhaustive description of how Coach Jones would pick the team and the ideal makeup of the team. Coach Jones meticulously listed attributes of the kinds of boys he was looking for, finally the kinds of boys he didn't want. It was like a job description. His ideal makeup for a varsity team was 5 seniors, 5 juniors, and 2 sophomores. A number he was close to his beloved 1999 team. Characteristics of the boys that Coach Jones thus looked for included academic soundness, those who were coachable, those who could concentrate, those who hustled, those with aggressiveness, those with loyalty. Okay, and the list of characteristics for boys Coach Jones avoided was interestingly longer and included troublemakers, those who know it all, those who always have excuses when they make mistakes, those who blame others for their mistakes, those who never get a chance because the coach will not let them, those who are only interested in themselves and not the welfare of the team, those who quit on themselves, those who are habitual hypochondriacs, those who are losers, those who are unable to get along with the other players or the coach on and off the court. Man, a couple of things stood out to me about Coach Jones' criteria for the boys he looked for. He clearly stated that being on the team the previous year was not a guarantee for making the current roster. Also, tryouts were a game of war where the hungry ones made the team. Furthermore, making the team was simply the threshold that each player had to continue to work. Finally, he rated loyalty highly. That is, he would keep a kid who was less talented, but who was loyal over a more talented kid deemed not loyal. It wasn't all about talent, it seems. I think I'll stop there. I'm gonna read the outset. Let's want to hear the second part. Okay.
So just wanted to say, like, the book as the reader, as an educator as well, it's just beautifully written. I would say to everybody who hasn't had it happen yet, really brilliant work, brilliant writing, as you can see from the passage, even from that passage, very descriptive. as a scientist, how did you begin writing?
Wow, so that's a good question. Uh, Writing is an integral part of science, uh, and it's no matter which part of it you do it, it's pharmacology, brain is involved, and that's important for individuals like this one man here who write in that field. Writing is an essential part of that. But I was also for most of my life writing everywhere. So it's writing fun and books around. So
What motivated you to write this book? Even though you didn't go on to play basketball, you graduated from that side. So what was the motivation behind it?
well, this was a good time. That's one of the things I was thought about when I was writing this. Me seeing the shot, getting caught up in craze of the game. I don't know if like it is today like it was in that particular post Magic Mary Michael era. But there was just something very magical about that time, seeing varsity teams have their successes and wanting to do that, and then seeing what actually went into it, and then experiencing some of the ups and downs of athletics. And those are lessons that went with me through my education, my actual studies. So,
We interviewed 43 players and coaches. Anybody want to think about qualitative research and interviewing 43 people? That's a lot. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication. Why did you choose this approach, and were there specific individuals that you were targeting?
well, I thought it was there are a couple things there. When you write something like this, you I didn't play after high school, so there's a aspect to legitimize what you're doing. So when I was finally able to track down Jason Rowe, that was huge. Everybody knows Jason Rowe. Everybody knows Damian. Everybody knows Timothy Wynn from that area. But I also wanted to hear what their experiences were like and to see what it was like to play at Buffalo South and then get city honors. And while some guys went far with the game and some guys stopped early after high school, there weren't a lot of overlapping themes. I think pretty much everybody ran into some form of adversity, whether it was in high school or afterwards. So life happens to everybody. It happens to everybody. So I really wanted to know what it was like for them at other schools, and I wanted to see what the similarities and the differences were.
What did you learn from the discussion?
Well, as I just described, uh, everybody was in some form of adversity at some point. Learned what it was like to play for Coach Cardinal and Coach Mitchell, Coach Monty from the Agri Frontier League, Coach Fran from City Honors. Who are some of the other young players that I George Gales, I remember like playing for Veronica. So I really got to hear what it was like in those games compared to what we experienced. But also, there were some kids who were born into basketball families. Okay, Jason was born into a basketball family. Carlos Bradbury from the South, he was born into a basketball family. And then even the basketball experience in Niagara Falls is very different than it was in Buffalo. It's like a small village. It's a smaller city, so it's like a small village where these kids were training at the Boys Club and IMCA. And that was a secret to why this LaSalle was as good as it was all the time, because they all had good works. There was a pipeline, like a nice pipeline that was feeding LaSalle. Those lines just had to coach them. You have to teach them how to bounce a basketball. You have to teach them how to play against the zone, to run his flex offense. So I really got to see what it was like for the other in my era, but also something else interesting. Something else that was interesting to me since touch tech when the Yale Cup and the fashion section was, the Yale Cup wasn't always represented in Section 6, as my cousin Coach Richardson said. They weren't always, the Yale Cup didn't always play in Section 6 after the Yale Cup play, which I thought was, because all I knew was the Yale Cup team was being able to compete in the Class A, B, and C sectionals, but he said no, we had a 14 playoff, and then we got ready for baseball and track. So a lot of guys missed out on their potential to go out to falls from those generations.
It's football a little bit longer too to catch up to. I feel this is a basketball story, but it seems to be saying some other things beyond terms and our. How did you structure the story in this manner? What did you want the readers to look?
Well, the way I wrote this, one of the things, again, it's the story of a kid kind of finding his way around, figuring out how to be students, figuring out how to be a basketball player, trying to put everything together, and struggling at times. And the other thing I realized as I worked on this is I might not have played at some of the other Yale Cup schools. Okay, Coach Jones was looking for a certain kind of kid, personality-wise. Depending on the coach, they were taking the most talented kids. And Coach Coffey from Kensington, I think it was like that over at Kensington. Coach Mitchell, you weren't in that top 13 or 12. You can come over and say, thank you for coming out, but this isn't for you. But Coach Jones was looking for a certain talent, but he was also looking for coachability potential. He was also building for subsequent years and those 5 years that he was at high school.
So we see Mama Grill over here. There's a particular line in your book that kind of made me think of teachers that were the opposite of when we're educators alike. Dedicated their lives to try to uplift us, but there is that contingency of teachers that that do not have that same mentality. So on page 154, I just want to go into it. Just mention the passage that just says that you never developed a comfort level with Mrs. Ergeron, who's probably sitting in at some point soon. As a teacher, she gave me attention one time because another student was talking to me during class. She also got on me because I asked my mother to help me out with some of the complex math concepts we were learning. Shout out to Mom in the back. She was unfamiliar with them. Mrs. Underon also gave me pushback regarding helping me after school with questions I had. She insisted that I get the help I needed during classroom hours, which is fair, I guess. Some teachers wanted to leave punctually after school, it seems. And as an educator, that kind of stood out to me, in terms of seeing those teachers that want to run to the door when you get out. So in terms of the story that you found, and maybe some of the other ones, you mentioned some of the names, but what do you feel in terms of the teachers that actually were willing to stay, willing to go to coaches that were willing to put in that desire? Coaching kind of gives you more time than anything else, I think, in terms of influence. So what did you get from the people that you interviewed and your own experience in regards to those extra dedicated?
Okay, well, I think it's important to say that any of the names were true. Unless you want to do that to cover yourself or something. In that particular instance, I guess TV, students going after school with the help they need. But as one of my father's educator out in Baltimore, he said, "Grade 5." So a bunch of teachers are headed right out with the students, and they don't want to stay and do any of the extra struggling students, whatever they're struggling in. So, I'm not saying this to demonize anybody. I think that's where also, in any arena you can go into, you're gonna have people who are training right at the time of clock off. Or in the basketball sense, you're gonna have players who are gonna go to practice and then leave, and you're gonna have those like they say Kobe hung around shooting more jump shots than he was supposed to, more free throws than he was supposed to, and that yeah, students are impacted by that. And in that instance, Ms. Ungaran thought I should get the help I need to write that class. Even though I'm struggling, and Hutch Tech was a, you guys know, it's a STEM school, so we would take a course, learn a course, do that, learn all kinds of things. And some kids figure it out pretty quickly, some don't.
You mentioned your dad, and it was a quote that stood out to me also in the introduction. But just to paraphrase it a little bit, there was a situation where you had a failure, like you said that my dad kind of threw it back up in my face at some point.
Yeah.
And you know, for us learning, you know, just as a learning as a parent also, so I often want to make sure that I'm sometimes, you know, maybe try to get humor or be cynical sometimes, but may affect you in a different way. So that coming from that, did you feel like it was harder for you to gain perseverance at that point, or after that, or was it easier coming from parental?
So I think what you're referring to is in preface, and I think I was talking about this my first book, so I really gave an introduction to myself and my motivations, and I think in that particular story, staying with my father after earning my doctorate at the University of Michigan, and I think I became interested in financial literacy, and I put my dream up on the wall in a room, which was to achieve a certain financial goal at a certain point. And I didn't hit that mark. And later on, brought it up in a not so healthy way. We were the two of us. And so in that particular part of the preface, I was really talking about the importance of dreams. You can't share your dreams with everybody. You probably shouldn't share your dreams with everybody. And the importance of mentors. So whenever you set out to do something, whether it's play basketball or get into real estate investing or whatever, you really want to surround yourself with those people. And so when other people tell you, yeah, you didn't achieve this, you know, you kind of have that support. So a lot of things like, for a lot of things like support for people who walk that.
Like volume 1 right at the top, it says first edition, so it looks like there's part 2 to the book. You want to say a few words about what you expect to cover in part 2, and you know, timeline in terms of when you expect to have
So I've been thinking, out the next steps, and you know, there will be a second edition of this one. Writing books is very complex. The person who do it, then self-published, realize how many layers there are to this. But there is a part 2 to this, and I'll just say it deals with what happens in basketball trains. Okay, because as they say in the commercial, NCAA commercial, what only 10% go on to play Division I basketball, and only 1% of those go on to the pros. So something happens to the other 90%. Sometimes it's injury, you can't control that. Sometimes it's coaches, sometimes it's leaders that held the previous groups together. Sometimes that culture gets lost. This is the whole thing also. So I do spend a lot of time, particularly talking about our 1991-92 team, lauding Michael Mann and Deion Frazier, Chris Suter, for holding the culture together. Okay, and Coach Jones, second, they were extensions of him. And I'll just say that once your leaders leave, chaos can break loose.
Like a man in the middle of the all the questions that I have from David, just if you want to, before we break, ask any questions in the audience, just any key takeaways or key points that you want, that's going to leave us with.
Well, I'll just say that the themes described in this work, we're at an interesting time. I'm not criticizing this, but socially, culturally, in this country, we're at an interesting time. Things look quite different than 50, 60 years in terms of what society is, what a community is, what families are. And certain things, as I just described, the culture of basketball team, certain things aren't passed on. They're going to get lost, and you're going to end up with something different. So there are a lot of things being said here in this story. Challengers there.
If you have any questions, we can, Dr. Dunbar, round of applause real quick. Definitely in between the pages of the book. Hopefully my son, maybe we can get together a little bit. Tempted a couple times, and I have to start to get through the whole thing. So maybe this one.
First of all, I do want to congratulate these young men for their achievements. They are such positive role models. I want them to know this. I did some research in that second grade classroom that they were a member of. I found out that over 90% of those students turned out to be successful lawyers, doctors, writers, poets. I'm trying to figure out what was it about that second grade classroom that I taught. And don't try to figure out how old I am. Congratulations.
Sorry, guys. When I transferred to Campus West, I am all my brother. When I transferred to Campus West, one of the things that surprised me was how many people asked me, "Are you in Ms. Doyle's class?" And I kept telling them, "No, who is this person?" Somebody special. Thank you.
That's just,
And that's what my, piggyback off them. What did you get from in support, people that were behind you, for you to reach where you are? You had to stand on people's shoulders and say your mom, your uncle. How did that support help?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ira. I think in my home, and that's another lesson from everybody's home. I did discuss here that there was love at home, but there were values, life values, and work ethic instilled by my mother. And how to do it. Following the rules, doing things right. Why are you laughing? Okay. Yeah, following the rules, doing things right, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, and that's very important. In competition, you have to pick up some other stuff. You have to learn how to be a little chip on your shoulder, be a little nasty, and someone shoves you when the ref isn't looking. you have to, straighten up your back and shove it back, shove him in the rest of the you have to learn how to compete and develop level toughness as well. So there were some critical pieces that were laid down, some of which I didn't understand. I was like, mowing the grass and picking up garbage, washing the dishes, and that's hard structure.
So I think that for in that moment when we really start medical journey, but is that thing impacting to journey with where I journey with how and thinking through that type of competitive land can really take
That's a really good question. Have you seen that? Okay, you should watch it. It was, as a middle schooler, I think you're almost there. Again, that was one of the most magical things I had seen up to that point. And I even go back and watch it on YouTube sometimes. They really sold the NBA to us at that time, and it was really a magical moment. And like a lot of young men, I said, "Oh, I want to do that." But I think as you go along, you have to learn how Michael got to that point, and that's not easy for everybody. And the truth is, you watch documentaries on Michael. When it comes to competition, he's a little crazy as well. And that I think that was inside of him. So I think at that age, it's not obvious to every kid that it takes a level of to get to that point. And even when it gets hard, even on days when you don't feel like placing up your sneakers and going to play. From inside him. And that's the secret. The secret is what love plays a role, staying healthy, being on the right team, good coach that plays a role. That's what I would say is that in terms of watch and reflect on. That's a good question. So a lot of authors, their first book takes 10 years. Okay, so there was some learning up front. My first writings weren't very good. My mother, I told the story here, my mother asked me when I showed her something if you ever thought about taking a writing course. Which I did. It was very good coaching. But being able to persevere and stick to something, I think I had those tools naturally. I think you have to, as they say, life keeps on lifing, life in the last 10 years. So you have to persevere and keep going and set your eyes on that goal. And, people remember when you say you're going to do something and they remember that you don't finish it, and they remember when you finish it. And so you have to, the why really, really matters. I think that's something I learned from Michael Jordan too, that what's your motivation? And I didn't want to be one of those people who said they're going to do something.
First, I apologize for being late. I'm sure you probably remember. Coach Jones' oldest son.
Lee.
Yes. Very good. I wouldn't have missed it. I get sorry for it, but I first off, I want to throw a lot of praise your way because my father really appreciated you. He respected you, he appreciated you, but what I want to know is, while you were there, how tough was he? Because he was a tough one. I mean, how did that aspect not drive you away? And also, you know, because I know you mentioned a lot.
Yeah, and I might even ask the Michael Mann for a moment as well. Like, for me, it wasn't. He wasn't a tough SOB to me. It was more. He's one of the grandfather, and I was part of his family basketball family, and he treated it a lot of like his sons, like you know. And so for me, it wasn't that way. And as you asked me about some of our next coach, when your father coached me, it hit different than the way the next coach I was telling you. Like your father coached me and motivated me to make it harder. So that's what I was saying. Like, we went same thing.
Like you have to be first, and then kind of talk about Joe. Outside of my parents, he was number one. Yeah, I was just one of my things was that he was very tough. And I'm a better person because of it. But it might have played a little part with me as not going as far as I wanted to at first. I'm very knowledgeable in the game. I mean, it's almost like that was a DNA thing in him. But he was almost in a little bit living his life through me. And but
We can talk about that a little bit, like some of the other topics that were book, the dynamic between parents, you know, and how that parental relationship has the different impact when we have to influence. So for instance, my uncle could say something to me in a different way than my dad could, even though they may be saying the same thing, but I may receive it better from so like that situation, I feel like, you know, your dad is your father versus the players. Like you see how, you know, like parents say that's those are the next person up. Yeah. So when you're coaching, I think that's the dynamic. The same thing with teachers in the classroom as well. It's like the same thing. So you know, they have a
well, I was happy to see that his love of the game, of students of the game, was passed on. And I was really touched when you Anwar gave the eulogy at my father's funeral. And it was one of the loveliest things I've ever heard. And I always will be deeply respectful in your trust.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming. I will say that I know how much you love the game and being the oldest of children. I can see that being difficult. And if I will say this, before one of the things he would say to me, before he passed away was, you know, if I could go back, I'd be just as demanding of more.
And it makes you like that. Once you get old enough, and I say in my case, the charity, and that might not have been until I was 20. You know, and it's that. Then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not as smart as I think I was. And then the respect for how smart other people are, he was very, and from reading in the book, you are to be congratulated for first off, for your dedication, but your aspiration for knowledge, education, and because when everything boils down to, besides how good a person I am, knowledge is power. And you have power.
Thank you. I'll just say that one of my regrets is that I didn't see the finished products that once that finish that book, it takes time with the day job and life happening. But certainly, uh, I don't think with part two. I was crushed when the step there.
Yeah, question.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm President from Cameron's President. I was going to know what inspires you. I know that and the lessons that was learned from what inspires you to make the transportation book and to write the book and to share it with everyone in the world to experience and the knowledge of the game.
Well, first off, since you ended the question with that, the game's changed quite a bit. So I know a little bit of something, but I think the entire journey, I think it's worth passing along. I think it's worth because it's not obvious, no matter what you're doing, trying to succeed in, it's not always obvious what to do other than the fact that you want to do it. So being a basketball player, that's very nuanced. It's very, I mean, you go to the court and play every day. That's a part of the formation. You have to figure out how to develop. How do you develop? What do you develop? If someone's not there to teach you that, then you're gonna struggle. And going back to this being a Gladwellian book, a Malcolm Gladwell book, an inspired book, again, certain people are born into certain things. So, me and Jason really talked about this. They did the work, so I'm not diminishing what they did. It's spectacular. Sal guys the same way, the same thing, but a lot of those guys were born into basketball. So, by the time it becomes varsity level, they knew what a state tournament was. So the other kids were learning how to watch basketball. But they already knew, so they were light years ahead of everyone else. And so, how does that relate to the real world? Well, if you're born into a family that buys real estate and buys rental units, you already know what that is. And your life is going to look very differently than a kid who's been groomed to just go work for someone else. So it matters. When you get older, you look around. There are reasons why things are.
What process of writing this book? What share some of the challenges?
I'd say the biggest one was just time. You know, I am a Fed. I'll keep that discreet. But time, staying motivated, and actually in the beginning, when I list out the guys, the 43 players supposed to interview, I actually thanked them because each time I talked to them, they all said, "Hey, this is good what you're doing. I appreciate you wanting to hear my story." And so each of those guys helped me go. Curtis Brooks, Quincy Lee, Chuck Thompson, they all, all those words of encouragement at the end, that helps to keep me going. I knew it was worthwhile. Yeah, this is worth telling for us. Yeah. Yes, what you look at Brooks and still in. How often that practice habits, game habits, things that you learned back then, you still apply to using the life? Yeah, the practice habits. Well, I'll tell you what, my work email for years, I think we don't have our signatures now, but I work signature with strategy becomes relevant. And you recall from Memorial Service, the clergyman did say he ministered to his players every day. So he did minister to us every day. He was teaching the game. He loved the game, but he was teaching us life as well. So all those life skills he taught us, I try to take with me and keep in mind. Every day is not easy. Some days are hard. Sometimes coworkers say something to you or project takes a turn from the you didn't expect to take. But you have to know how to navigate those things without burning all of the bridges.
It's not a question, but, I couldn't let this event go by without saying something in terms of the pride I'm feeling right now in my son. I know how hard he worked on this project and how long he worked on the project. And I would ask myself, when are you gonna finish the book? He traveled all over the country to get interviews with his former classmates, different coaches. He was very thorough, and it is such an accomplishment. I think for a young, black male, my hope and dream is that younger black men read this book because it's full of guidance. It's got humor and life lessons that they can learn. So if you know any young, this will be an excellent tool. And I'm so proud of this. It's worked out very well.
Yeah, I think Ms. Holly said they're very punctual about getting everybody out there.
Right. Refreshments on the table, and, are you gonna sign in here, Anwar? Are you gonna sign in? Okay, and he's gonna sign the book at the table.
Man.
But you made such an impression on him, and it's just influenced his whole life. I think. Yes. Can you take a front of my sign in the hallway? You're going where? In line with you.